Hey, welcome. It's Dr. John Bush. This is lesson 140, tight end case study using median consistency. I've been talking about this since lesson 128. Go back and start there. We are continuing now and trying to use this in a predictive way for 2022. I actually did write an article here as well to be on the Science of Fantasy .com website, and this is the video lesson. Sometimes I get a little tangential here on the data, and you can look at the article and listen to me run my mouth if you want. It's all here to help you. There's anybody out there who's a creator, there is no pot of gold at the rainbow here. This is just stuff that I'm doing for myself. And since I am a college professor, university professor, I enjoy spreading the goodness here through my teaching style and video lessons here. So that is the reason doing this for you guys. For me, I've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. Getting better, I hope. Hard to tell. We have lots of good articles over there, video lessons, and it's all lots of data driven science of fantasy football goodness, trying to come from that perspective here, a little bit different than most out there, and we can have that debate about what that means. But anyway, let me roll here. Got 10 slides to talk about. Start off with tabular data. Using the 2021 season, if you'll go back to lesson 128, I take you through this. But basically, it's position, the year, the player, and what I call the comp/game score, which is in percentage. It is a measure of the 2021 season, the weekly amount that the player in question, this is Kelsey here, accomplished a median production. In other words, a production above a certain level for tight ends. I used 2017 to 21 to establish that. I think it's 10 or 12. Hey, I don't know. You have to go back and figure it out. I forgot what I said. Anyway, whatever that number is, it's pretty close to right there. I want to say maybe is it 12? I don't know. Anyway, 12 fantasy points in a PPR. And then I have the ADP. It's a little couple weeks old, but hey, it pretty much gives you a landscape of what people were thinking and probably going to think for a little bit. What's interesting to me is, and I sorted this by public support if you use ADP. So Kelsey's number one, Andrews number two, Pitts, Kittle, Waller, Schultz, Hockenson, etc., going down the list. But if you look at the median consistency weekly scoring, you see that those numbers are not necessarily associated with the public's opinions. I believe Pitts is the most glaring example here. He only returned 2 out of 10 weeks above median. So that Love at the ADP, number 3, third tight end, is based on anticipation. So it's based on something that he's not done. People sometimes complain about fantasy that, hey, the numbers, they did this and now they're not doing it, and they get kind of mad and they don't kind of understand that once you step out of what's, the past, then going into the future, it gets squishy and it's a landmine and you don't know what's going on, right? It's the future, right? So all I can tell you is Pitts returned 2 out of 10. So think about what that means, and we'll come back to him, but that is interesting. Kittle, for instance, is number 4, yet he returned the second best consistency, 5.7 out of 10, so close to 6 games per 10 games success, right? Kelsey was in a zone of his own almost 7 out of 10 weeks, almost Mr. Automatic, and then Andrews was about 53%, so 53 out of 100 games or 5 out of 10 games. So really, in some ways, Andrews is a little bit higher than you would think Kittle would be. Notice Hockenson there at 50%, he's way down. Again, Waller and Schultz are higher, or a less ADP. They're thought of better than Hockenson, but they didn't produce as much consistency there. Look at Gronkowski. Keep going. Look at Logan Thomas at 3 out of 10, and he's way down there. So I think you can probably imagine this should set us up for making and finding later tight end values as well, plus taking your stab at an early pick. I think if you walk past Kelsey to Kittle, Pitts, Andrews, Waller, Schultz, Hockenson, let's say, gets a little dicey there. Things are not lining up. In other words, Kittle would seem to be the logical second choice. But people are worried that, and again, expecting that Trey Lance is not going to deliver for Kittle. So there's expectations below what a player did, and like Pitts, expectations above what they did. Once you're relying on strictly what hasn't been done before, it can get dicey and it could blow up, and you can, get burned on those players. So just be thoughtful about how you want to play it. What is your uncertainty tolerance in this game? I have a whole thing on personal factors in my video lessons. You can look at those, but you need to be deciding what you're doing and understand what you're stepping out into. Is it solid or could be squishy? And, but to ignore it is just foolish indeed. Not saying you should take Pitts, second or third or fourth. It's just you need to know what's there and what, kind of what I believe my partner in crime, Dennis, says is range of outcomes. Given what I see in Pitts, I think his range of outcomes is probably higher than people who would not think too quickly would just grab him second or third. And then maybe if the outcomes in 2022 is not as strong, they would be cussing on Twitter about it. But I think he has a wider range than maybe somebody like Kittle. So think about it. You just need to be educated in your choices and your selections. That's kind of where we're all at, hopefully, as analysts and pundits for you, is to draw your attention to what we're seeing, but not ignoring it. In other words, people that are just saying Pitts is the best ever, in my opinion, are driving you blindly to their narrative. And if they're ignoring what's gone on, they're ignoring the narrative that they should be talking about, which is a wider range of outcomes. And I understand there's clickbait and money on the table for these writers and websites, and people are attracted to sensational situations, and what is that, and they'll have these Pitts good or bad, and you have to go out and click lots of things to finally figure out what they thank there. And, you know, here it is. You don't have to click anything from me here. You get my data. It's not my data, it's the data if you use my methodology. So there you go. Continuing. So next, I looked at ADP and their consistency, and I converted those metrics that you saw to a scale of 0, which is the worst, to 100, which is the best. And I call it normalized. It could be scaled numbers, whatever it is. I assign numbers, and once you assign numbers on the same scale, you can actually subtract those and get a difference, and I call it the diff value. Notice that I assigned Kelsey a 116, because if you don't put him outside the range of everybody else, then it really skews, I think, the whole value system below him. So you have to set him up and say, look, he's beating everything here. He's in his class by himself. So that's why I did 116. So you subtract 116 and his ADP normalizes 100, then that's plus 16, which is in purple. And by the way, I colorized the ADP, the best ADP in blue, the best consistency in green, the worst red in both. And then difference is purple is really good and yellow is not so good. And then I assigned an assignment of underlay or overlay, and that is a term probably from gambling. Overlay is where you're getting more than you're paying, right? So it's a bargain, right? At the grocery store, it's hard to find them these days, certainly not at the gas station. And so overlays are what you're looking for in your uncertainty analysis there. And underlays are those that are value could be less than you're paying. So that's kind of like you're overpaying for them. And if you use ADP as a so-called draft capital concept there. So we see that Kelsey, Andrews, Kittle, Hockenson, Knox, Gronkowski, Logan Thomas are going to be in a one tight end league, your main overlays, at least using my consistency numbers. And that is not the end. That is just a beginning for you to dig deeper and think about what's your tolerance on uncertainty and how you're reading here. This is never to be followed automatically. It's just an opportunity for you to see one lens and decide, okay, let me go study a little bit and see does what I'm finding and what I'm comfortable with, does it go with this? If it does, then that's probably a great choice in your drafting here. So I'm not sure I wouldn't wait for somebody like Knox, and if Gronk comes back, he might be a good play as well. And you could then pick higher WRs and RBs in your drafting and still end up fairly close to where you would be. Probably Kelsey's the only one that if I had the shot, especially in a premium, tight end premium league, where you get more credit for catches, and even Andrew might be in that catch scenario. Those might be two that I might be, yeah, I think I'll take those. But after that, one can find the chinks in the armor, as it were, the holes in the paper of the metric paper of the rest of them. So just do some due diligence and thinking. But this is what this data is saying. You can look at the articles. Well, I spell out pretty much what I said. The next information is I looked at fantasy points from 2021, and we got the number. So I sorted by the highest to lowest. So Andrews produced more fantasy points in a PPR setting because he had a boatload of targets, 154, goodness. So Andrews' team Baltimore games were 17 targets, fantasy points per game. And the consistency number that I generated and the level of consistency, I call it type C, is it high, above average, below average, or low? So obviously low is weak, below average is not very good, above average and high are where you want to be, and certainly high, I would argue, would be where you want to be. And then the type of EOS, which is end of season fantasy points, you can see how I rated those players by their points, and I arbitrarily cut Pitts and Knox one high and one above average there. And so you can then see somebody like, say, Pitts was below average, Goddard was high, and Ertz was above average. They were all very close in points, 108, 107, 106. Yet their journeys throughout the season was very different. So that's the whole point, was if you walk away from points or you include that, then you ask yourself, how consistency were them? Fantasy football is a weekly game, and every week you're starting kind of back over and trying to win. It's not at the end of the year you're getting the most points. I know there are some leagues where it's points only. Got that? You know, if you play in those, I don't play in those. Okay, so we use week to week scoring system, and that, you know, and that's how it is. So it's important to consider who's going to give you a consistent production each week, and the more consistent, the better it is probably for your team overall. Inconsistent players are, you know, may be thrilling. It's kind of like a roller coaster. The highs are great, but the lows are sad. And anybody who's invested in the stock market understands the roller coaster, and we're in kind of the lows right now, and that's sad. You know, we all enjoyed the highs, but now you got to pay the price for the lows. So that's the whole point of this consistency, is trying to make a weekly prediction. So not only are we predicting kind of using what they did last year, but you assume that they're going to continue that consistency. And of course, you can be wrong. You know, there's a range of outcomes. There's new players, new environments, new situations. But that's what we're doing. And this is my beta test. That means I'm just pulling this out and going to start looking at the results, you know, over a couple years, you know, and think, okay, is this worthy of continuation? Okay, so I won't know that to the end of the season, and probably even a couple years. Unfortunately, some pundits kind of, you know, jump over here. Well, that didn't work. Let me jump over there. And sometimes, especially in stats, you need a lot of data points before you can make some firm conclusions. And the problem we all have in fantasy is there's only 17 games, and a lot of those, you know, by the time you playoffs and what really don't matter, it could be the first 14 games that matter. And then there's bye weeks. So really, you know, how many games are really critical for your team, right? If you don't make the playoffs, then your game's over at week 14 or 15. So you don't care about week 16, 17, or 18. You're done. You're somewhere else. And so this is that one for the top, 24. Here's the next group here. Low consistency, but you can see that some of them, like Logan Thomas, is a deep play, and Tanyan actually could be considered a deep play as well. They just didn't return any points, but when they were active, they were fairly consistent. Okay, AA is above average, so that might be in a deep league. Those could be some, tight end 2, 3 types, especially in tight end premiums here. And I've just got another list for you if you're looking for some deep plays there. There's the list. These are not even worthy of deep consideration unless there's massive injuries. Okay, I now turn to the case study side of this video here. Pitts, Goddard, Ertz. They're 8th, 9th, 10th in fantasy points, 108, 107, 106. And Goddard didn't have as many targets because he only played 15 games, but he produced a boatload of points. In fact, more points per game than the other two, 7 versus 6. Okay, and he also had the best consistency. When he was playing, he returned a high level of consistency. That's what the H stands for here in green. Ertz was above average, so that's still something to take into consideration. And Pitts was 44%, 44 and below average. Anything below 50 is below average. So right now, it seems Pitts is not as strong if you're looking at consistency as Gertz and Goddard and Ertz. So we'll see what that means. Next data. Looking at the weeks, these are the actual fantasy points right here. And then what I did is subtracted, I think I subtracted, is it 12? Yeah, so 12 is the median fantasy points there. And you see Goddard week 1 was 14.2, subtract 12, that's 2.2. So anything positive over here got colorized by a green color. Anything what I consider above 4 was given a light green, bright green color. That's spectacular. And a dull green was above median, but wasn't as spectacular as the other one. So Pitts gave you 3 great games, 1 okay game. So 4 total. That's not. So 4 weeks. Ugh. Goddard gave us 1, 2, 3 great games. And he gave us, let's see, I think he was off this week, 6. And then 14, he didn't play in 18. So he gave us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 15. That's not bad. And Ertz gave us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So Ertz actually gave us a lot above median, just not only 2 great games. Okay. So in some ways, Goddard was a little stronger than Ertz, but across the season, because Goddard missed some games, Ertz kind of was closer than you might think. And let's look at, if you tap the points here, Pitts was green diamonds and, pretty much 3 great games and maybe almost median here. So the rest of the time he was sad. Below the pink line, that's the median. So there was lots of sadness if you picked him last year. Goddard's in blue, 4, 5, 6, but then some sadness too. So kind of almost extreme that way. He's either doing you good or not, or you were really punished there. Ertz was more consistently close to the median than I think probably most people realize there. That's not, it wasn't too far off here. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wasn't too far off. And even these other games weren't too bad. Okay. And so if you look at their overall polynomial trend line, this is Pitts. Hits a little high and then he's gone, and he's deeply gone here. in green. Gertz hit a little bit early, then disappeared, and then came back and probably helped you in the playoffs. So a lot of people may remember that. But Ertz, if you see, spent from 6 to almost 18 near median every week. He was returning close to value. So that's not bad. So I think I'm left with picking those two over Pitts. In the article, I think I may actually lean Ertz because he's a little bit cheaper than Goddard as far as value. So these are closer than consistency might tell you because of some dramatic nature of those two. But Pitts, because of the lot of the sadness, I'm stepping away using this lens and saying Goddard and Ertz and probably picking the value of the two, which could be Ertz this season. So I think that's where I'm landing right now, but it could change. If the ADPs change, then to me though, Gertz seems a little bit more extreme. I'm thinking consistency means a little bit safer, whatever that means. In fantasy football, I'm not sure there's such a thing as safe, but safer maybe, and that seems to be Ertz. So I think I'm landing with him, but I could understand Goddard. It's just the price I'm paying to me is what, does that final separation. But I could certainly flip if I can get Goddard cheaper than Ertz. And I guess if they were the same value, it would, if I was in a tight end premium, I still might go Ertz. I don't know. This is going to be some deeper thinking here. This is going to be a tough question, but right now that's superficially that's where I'm leaning. Right, this is one of those things that's going to be back and forth all preseason. Sometimes it's not clear. Even with all the data on the table, you still there's still a cloud, there's still some haze there. So that's okay. That's just the way data can be sometimes. And to somehow think that it has to be clear and you have to announce it, yes, I know this is how it is. That's probably not the person you want to, listen to a lot, because in reality, it's a lot of decisions are, Goddard versus Ertz here. It's more fine-tuned than that. It's not as much clarity as we would love, right? Okay. Thanks for listening. I've got wide receivers coming up very soon. Woo woo. We're having extra amount of fun.